You can talk to your accountant and your bookkeepers and people who are looking at your money and your tax position, and if they're not reaching out to you or they're not being proactive, or you don't hear from them, it's not a good sign.
One of the things that we often see is when the client's wanting to plan for exits, bringing the financials in order and everything else, and making sure that the systems that they operate well. And then that's where we sort of say, okay, Michael, now how do we need to structure this exit? How do we draft sell proposals? How do we, what are we actually trying to sell? And to your point, it's not uncommon. We always, the founders of a business always overestimate valuations. The other party always want to sort of, look for avenues to negotiate it down to at a discount, and all these other things happen. But at the same time, if you have a pretty neat operation by way of governance and by way of financials, so you've got a business that's much more sellable than if you didn't have these structures in place and a systematic process. How many people I've contracted, and the incoming person can safely presume the operation without having to worry about, well, okay, this was a problematic employee, I'm going to stand them down. I'm not going to inherit all the other contractors out of this business. So the importance is really that, where you have structured everything so neatly from the start, and then you go, well, look, you can safely take over this because I've done things, I've done it all very methodically. So that's where doctors, they often occupied to think about these issues. They're just really busy in the middle of it, generating billings. It's obviously quite a taxing profession, very long hours, extremely demanding mentally, physically, and psychologically. They've got the illusion that this thing is operating and is making money, and it's clearly translating to some cash flow freedom in their lives. But that's where they need to sort of look out and go, well, is this even a profitable business? How am I going to pivot this? Can this run without me? And clear goals, clear financial, clear governance, and clear documented process to operate, especially when you go above a sort of 1.5 million to 2 million revenue, you are considered to be a relatively sophisticated practice. So that's where they need to get involved and get things checked. Am I operating this right? Is this even in the correct format and structure by way of business?
Yeah, that's right. And having that structure set up right, really from the beginning, is it sets you up well for the next topic, which is, the question of medical practices and doctors bringing in other partners. If you've got a good structure there, like you've got, for example, a really good shareholders agreement that allows people to buy in and out, exceed, get in and out, that makes things so much easier and so much more flexible, and often doesn't exist. However, it's an important document, as so is a unit holding agreement if you want to set it up in that structure. They're very important, and keeping your ownership separate and distinct by way of unit holdings, if you want to set it up in that way. But you always got to think about when someone's coming, what are they buying? How is the value set? What decision rights do they get? How do they leave? And that's going to maybe look at a few key documents, the constitution, maybe if you've got it set up as a company. Without documents in whatever structure it happens to be, the dispute is really just a deferred dispute, because eventually something's going to go wrong. And even if it's just that one person wants to get out, there's no structure for them to get out that's going to be a hotbed for a dispute, regardless of how nice and cooperative the people are. I've seen the best friends and the best people that get along and partners still end up in arguments with each other because they can't work out how to resolve these mechanics. And having those documents in place, they don't cost a fortune. They don't take enormous amount of time to draft. It's amazing documents available, and they can be tweaked to suit your practice, but just get them done, and this is the key point. It's just getting the documents done, and it'll take a lot less time than people think it will. And that's something that's often, needs to be put across to them.
Absolutely agreed, Michael. Yeah, very valid points. And you and I day to day operate with situations and circumstances that these are largely neglected. Generally, I can say 95% of the time, they convert to a form of litigation, which is awfully costly, detrimental to the reputation of the business, and extremely demotivating for doctors to see I've worked so hard and somebody can come and disrupt my operation and create so much stress and anxiety for me so easily, just because I could have or should have done something, with relation to it, and I didn't.